Astralis are back, and honestly, I did not expect it. When devve became in-game leader, I thought it wasn't going to be great, but look at this graph, okay? You cannot argue against this. devve takes over as in-game leader, and they skyrocket to the highest they've been for this core ever, up to 7th in the world. They've been taking names, they've been taking wins, and I'm going to be honest with you, I did not see this coming. When this tweet came out from devve, back in February, saying not having any fun playing whatsoever at the moment, which is seen on the performance, really disappointed and sad. This was just before devve was changing to in-game leader. A little time before he was about to change to in-game leader, and I sat there and thought to myself, you know what the last thing you want to do if you're not enjoying Counter-Strike is? Become an in-game leader. You guys have tried in-game leading sometimes, or calling things in matchmaking, I'm sure, and it is a painful experience. Now, okay, it should be a bit better on a pro team when your teammates will actually listen to you and not just completely screw you over. You call Rush B, your teammates are baiting you. That ain't gonna happen, but it is still the role that you have to put so much time into, so much hours out of the server to understand what's going on. And I remember thinking at the time, the line I was gonna say was, devve, okay, if you are in a failing marriage and you're losing your love for Counter-Strike, trying to spice things up in the bedroom by switching positions isn't going to save you. It's not going to save you. It's not going to bring the love back. That's what I thought. But man, have I been proven wrong, because Astralis have been on a tear lately. Some big wins, including a 2-0 over FaZe at IEM Chengdu. 2-1 loss against FaZe, but still a close game. Another win against FaZe in there, and then that close loss against Vitality in the semi-finals at Pro League recently. And I will say, devve's level has also improved. This was the old lineup. These were the stats. BlameF at the top there, devve 1.12. I mean, the differences are crazy. devve hasn't dropped off individually. He's got way better, in fact. Now, I will say, a lot of these stats get inflated by the fact the team is winning. That's something you have to remember. If the team is winning, you're generally going to get more kills anyway. You can even get more eco kills, which can always be nice. But I think it's pretty clear that devve is playing as well, if not better, than he was when he wasn't in-game leading. And that was a huge concern for me going into this. I was scared that devve, as a player, might not be able to cope with trying to manage the team and also trying to keep his individual ability high. But honestly, the stats of basically everyone have skyrocketed. Stounds have increased the most, but that makes sense because his roles have improved. He's getting a lot more of those BlameF type roles now, and he's allowed to be the star of the team, and fair play to him. He's doing a good job in the games we've seen so far. Yabby has improved as well. Everything looks great, and to be honest, I was really aggrieved with the initial move that Astralis made because I thought BlameF was getting scapegoated for being forced into in-game leadership, and I still think BlameF is a valuable player and should find himself on a team, but devve has honestly improved and performed way above expectations, has clearly been a way better leader for this team in this small time period. Now, here's something I will say. These stats, I think, are maybe a little misleading, certainly on devve's front, because if you look at these games, which I would say are against the top teams they've played in the harder matches, in this one, the 2-0 win against FaZe, devve, yeah, he did do well, but Stown actually top fragged here. Stair wasn't too far behind, and this was in group stage as well, but still an important game. Then in this one, in the semi-final, they played against FaZe in the same tournament. This is actually one where devve did struggle and finished bottom of the board. So in this big game, devve didn't actually hold up to what we might be used to for him individually, but the entire team was around the same level. Then, against FaZe again, they played a lot against FaZe. At Pro League, again, winner goes to playoffs, and again, devve actually a pretty middling performance. And then in the one against Vitality that they just lost, devve was top, he was solid, but I mean, what can you do against ZywOo? Crazy carry performance on the other side. So I think devve probably hasn't been crazy good in the big games, in the biggest games, for example, but he has still been solid, and that is way more than I was expecting, because the worst thing that could have happened here is devve making this change and then losing his individual ability and not even being a good in-game leader. The nice thing with this is, if for whatever reason a year from now, devve actually gets sick of in-game leading and the motivation slowly drops off, I think he could easily transition back to being an AWPer and it would be fine. And that is so important to know because you always want to have that ability to go back to star player device if you need it. And if another Danish in-game leader who's really good becomes available, I would still say that that's something that could be looked into. I do want to give a few caveats though, because yes, this has been great. It's been a meteoric rise. Astralis finally back to being a great team that we always knew that they have been in the past. Finally, a clear great Danish team again. But I do want to give some caveats. But the first thing I will say is, normally the numbers don't lie on these things, and at least for now, they've been playing great. Here's all the teams at Pro League. They were second highest on round win percent, normally a standard stat to look at, but they were also second highest on 5v4%. That means when they get the man advantage, they're closing it out more than almost anyone else. 4v5% is also up there. The traded percentage is maybe a little lower, but it's still solid. And again, traded percent is normally a good stat to sort of see how well is the team playing together, the cohesion of the team, which I think is the main thing people complained about when this squad was in-game led by devve. A lot of people felt like he would focus too much on his own stuff and his own sort of lurks and his own play more than the overall success of the squad. And clearly, I think that's changed. And again, even on the utility stats, damage per round is solid. Flash assists a little lower, but I don't care too much about these if you're winning rounds. I mean, look, Tai Lu are number 1 on flash assists, and they didn't exactly have a great event, did they? I will also say, on T side, in the entirety of Pro League, Astralis had the best round win percentage on T side, which for me is the most important job of an in-game leader. That's crazy. That is crazy that this has all happened so quickly for them. Now, admittedly, some of these numbers are a little more standout. This is still a solid man advantage round win percentage, but you can see it's not as good as some of the other teams here. And more importantly, I'm not going to lie, on T side, I don't think you can reliably win 53% of the rounds where you go a man down. That means more than half of the rounds, they're down in a 4v5, they were coming back and winning. And the other thing to point out is, this is a very small sample size on maps. So that's probably why some of these numbers are funky. But overall, again, the trade percentage is solid. These are all very good signs for Astralis. However, I want to give a couple of caveats. Number 1, it has been a very short time period that devve has been in-game leading. devve bench back in February 28th. And I do think early on in being an in-game leader is a completely different task to continually and consistently being an in-game leader later on. And let me explain why. When you are first becoming an in-game leader, your style is going to be kind of completely unknown. You might have an idea of how devve is going to call, but you're not going to know exactly how he's going to call for the team. But nowadays in Counter-Strike, anti-stratting is so unbelievably important. All the top teams are putting massive amounts of time into every game, researching exactly how their opponents play. And so far, teams have not had that much footage or data on this new Astralis team. And so the job going forward for devve is going to be, okay, I have to think one step ahead, and no teams are trying to counter me because now we have shown ourselves to be a real threat. People are going to focus on them much more, and that is a whole different ballgame. You see this from small teams all the time that can maybe go off a one-off run. Do you remember Into the Breach back at the Paris Major? They went on a bit of a run, and then if teams start looking into you a little more, maybe it's harder to keep it going. Now, I will say, Into the Breach, very different team from Astralis, okay? Into the Breach were playing some crazy loose play, some crazy aggressive play. I actually think Astralis looked pretty measured and controlled, but that can still be counted in its own way. It can even be small things, like if a team's tendency is to go a little too late into the round on T side, you just start saving smokes. And that is why in-game leaders that can adapt mid-game to win rounds are worth their weight in gold, and why someone like Carrigan is so consistently successful. Because most teams, I find, generally can find those adaptations from a timeout once their coach calls the timeout. That's normally when you tend to see those mid-game switch-ups that are so important come into play. You start saying, oh, we've realized they understand how we normally play. we need to do something slightly differently, maybe switch up the pace, keep them on their toes. And it's this constant chess match. And we've still got to see if devve can do that. I also think another very important thing to point out is everyone talked about the blame F move because that was a big deal. And, well, to some extent, maybe they talked about signing Bro. I don't think that was commented on too much either. But people were really talking about the blame F move, devve to in-game leader. But no one's really talked about the fact that Rugger got signed to this team as a coach. That is a huge change for Astralis, who honestly have kind of struggled in their coaching position for a while. You know, even when they promoted Ronick to be interim coach, this is a guy who came up through Astralis and has never really been a head coach in his own right. We saw Castle be head coach. We've seen them have to sort of consistently change this position. They've never felt comfortable with their coaching. They even kind of tried to get Hunden in, right? Back in those days before everything went wrong there and he turned into Voldemort. No one could talk about him anymore. But now they've got Rugger in, someone who has some tenure. Okay, you could say, yes, he's only been on OG as a team for 4 years. But OG have been solid. I think they've generally been fairly well run. And the thing you have to remember about OG is that they've never really had the resources or the players to actually succeed, right? So that makes it hard to know how good a coach is. Because honestly, Rugger has had some players that I kind of think are almost impossible to do like very, very well with or play very certain styles of Counter-Strike with if you don't have those either smart players or very experienced players at the top level. And so I think we have to ask ourselves how much of this has come from Rugger, because I've always thought he's been, you know, not someone that's massively talked about, but I think there have definitely been times when OG have overperformed their players. And more importantly, as I was just saying, it's so different coaching a team that doesn't have the top talent and you can only play a certain style. You have to almost play like a more upset style, because if you try and play the top teams playing proper, true, great Counter-Strike with great team play, you're probably just going to get wrecked. So at times, he probably had to call for some riskier plays on his team. Now he doesn't have to do that on Astralis. Maybe that is playing a big factor as well. So I think it's very interesting going forward. And I'm not going to predict an Astralis fall off massively, but we've got to remember it's only been a small period of time. It looks good, but do I see this team becoming the best in the world? Ugh, it's tough to say. It is tough to say. I also still have some reservations for them in big playoff games. I don't know if someone like Stown holds up, for example. And he kind of needs to be the main man for me now. Because if devve is calling, I can't expect him to carry the team through playoffs in the same way. But one of the reasons why I thought Blame F could be worth keeping is because I trust him more in big games, in those pressure moments in front of the stage, in front of the crowd, than Stown. And I've been waiting for years for Stown to become that guy who just gets out there, puts his balls on the table and says, screw it, I don't care anymore. And he becomes that sort of player because he's always had that capability. But I don't know if he's got the mindset for that. So I think Astralis are in a very interesting spot. It's definitely better than it has been. I want to see if Rugger going forward continues to coach the team well. And I think it was a very shrewd pickup, by the way, from Astralis. Getting an experienced coach when you are trying a new in-game leader is something that almost feels like a must, right? Rugger can absolutely be helping devve. I'm sure he is. But we have to remember, they haven't played that many games. They've only played against certain teams. Maybe they've just got a good matchup against FaZe. We'll have to wait and see. But they have been getting impressive results. A lot of 2-0s at Pro League. They're in an interesting spot. I think they're the team for me that is most potential to either go continually very well or to drop off pretty big time. I think either of those two routes could be seen going forward, and I think it's a really interesting time period now for Astralis. And more importantly, I'm so intrigued to see how they do if they do make a big playoff game. Because how many times, think back to the Major, how many times have we seen an experienced in-game leader be so important in those moments when the game is going to shit, when you're in front of the crowd, when everyone's feeling the pressure? Guys like Carrigan, even Alexi B, who I think has been underrated forever at the Major. He's shown that that is incredibly important. And maybe devve can get there, but it's going to take at least a year or two, I would assume. Or maybe devve is just built different. Who knows? Because honestly, he's got the looks, he's got the AWPing, he's got the in-game leading too. What can't this man do? At this point, let's make him the president. Why not? Tom Cruise out here. Absolutely great to see. Overall, happy for Astralis. It seems like they are going in the right direction. And I hope it continues going forwards. I'd be so curious to see what you guys think of this, though. I think they might drop off a little bit later in the year, maybe down to like 10th, 15th in the world. But there is still a good amount of potential on this lineup. And if devve can be Superman and actually become a great in-game leader, wow, we could be in for a treat. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you next time.